Harrison Price from the historic Wall Center. The Mr. Lube and Tires Change Your Oil, Change Your Wipers event is on now. Visit MrLube.com. Download a coupon for a free pair of Goodyear Hybrid wiper blades with any oil change. Only for a limited time at Mr. Lube with 18 locations in the Lower Mainland.
Jeff was very glad he had new wipers.
Absolutely.
Courtesy of Mr. Lube, because at the top of the Coke, it was a bit of a torrential drive.
Our Canucks reporter and Rinkwide host back from Penticton after Sunday's scrimmage and the end of camp. Jeff, how you doing?
Yeah, good. Back in one piece. But it was raining pretty hard up at the top of the Coke. We didn't have any rain in Penticton for the days we were there. I don't know about you guys and young stars, but it's Penticton and shoulder season. It's supposed to get nice again. I think it was they're going to get one last blast of summer here this week, but whatever the case, a little sprinkle of rain, but didn't dampen anything to do with training camp or Sunday scrimmage. I think the Canucks were absolutely delighted logistically with the way that the 2 weeks at the South Okanagan Event Center went. It really is an incredible facility, as you guys know, and I think it was Rick Tocchet's first look. He may have been in for Young Stars last year. I can't recall. But, boy, the number of times he referenced the luxury of having 2 sheets of ice to work on, and the Canucks certainly put both sheets to good use. There was no stone left unturned. It was really a well-thought-out, I thought, planned and executed training camp. And, again, proof will be in the pudding here as they move into the next stage, into the preseason. But, I think they checked off a lot of boxes organizationally with what they accomplished over the last couple of weeks in the South Okanagan.
What stood out to you from Sunday's scrimmage?
I think Artur Silovs, so much talk and concern about goaltending right up and through the Saturday sessions, and then the addition of Kevin Lankinen. And I don't know if it was a reaction to the organization's move to bring in another NHL goaltender, whatever the case. Artur Silovs, easily the best player on the ice. It was 2 halves of a scrimmage, so he had one period, the first period, stopped all 16 shots he faced, a couple of sensational saves, one off Daniel Sprong, another off Danton Heinen. So a couple of the newcomers putting themselves in position to score, but Artie said not so fast. He just looked dialed in, and so that's a good sign. The Lankinen addition obviously shores up the goaltending, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more of that. But the timing to me, it struck me a little bit funny at the very least that here the team brings in Lankinen on Saturday, and Artur Silovs says, wait a sec, I still kind of feel that's my net in the absence of Thatcher Demko, and he looked the part. So that was one of the things that jumped out at me. That line, and Rick Tocchet's talked about it through camp, of Connor Garland and Nils Höglander, the 2 buzzsaws on the wings, and Atu Ratu in the middle. Garland scored what turned out to be the game winner off a turnover and a quick little deke on Nikita Tolopilo. So it wasn't like that line dominated. Garland just pounced on an opportunity and showed some pretty good hands and finished there. But that line was undeniable. They were motoring all through camp. I thought they looked good. I thought Danton Heinen, again, had his opportunities. He had 2 really good scoring looks in the scrimmage game. He didn't score on either of them, and sure, you would love him to find the back of the net, but he does seem like he's settled in pretty quickly alongside JT Miller and Brock Besser. He's not a guy that's going to be on the highlight reels. You're not going to walk out of the rink thinking, man, Danton Heinen was the best player on the ice, but just positionally, he looks like a solid veteran. And so often when you have this mix of AHLers and some junior guys sprinkled in, the guys that have been there and done it and been doing this for a living for a while, they separate themselves with their habits, right? Just putting themselves in the right spots, the right reads, and all those types of things. And that's kind of what I noticed from Danton Heinen. Just little plays, subtle plays, but enough to think that, this guy's going to fit in nicely and be a help for the Vancouver Canucks. So, those were a few of the things that jumped out to me. Daniel Sprong, again, got the shot away. It really is, and we talked about this last week, but there's something there with that shot. Didn't score, but he had his opportunities. And I know people, and I've had a lot of people in my mentions as well, like, we haven't heard anything about Elias Paterson. Of course, there's 2 of them there, but I think they're talking about the guy that's making close to $12 million now. It didn't blow the doors off the rink, or, I think people probably watching the scrimmage on Sunday would have liked to have seen a little bit more, but this is no reason for concern. It is no reason for alarm. This is training camp. And now we'll start to get into more of an evaluation process with him and Jake DeBrusk. And of course, they were shepherding Jonathan Lekkerimäki on their wing throughout camp and the scrimmage as well. So, JT Miller and Brock Besser, Elias Pettersson, the veteran guys, the leaders of this group, I think they'll be ready to dial it up on October the 9th, certainly. And I hope that we see that next step in the progression here through the preseason, however many exhibition games they play.
Way more to gain for the role player guys than there is for the stars, for sure. One thing I wanted to ask you about, because before we jump down to the goaltending rabbit hole, which I'm sure is to come, we were talking with Quads on Friday about the high volume shooters that they have brought in, of which Sprong is one of them. And the flip side of the Artur Shilov's performance is the fact that he faced that many shots. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how all these role players who all have decent shots. I mean, are they're not, none of them are Ovechkin. No one's saying that, but you would think that if you take that many cuts, there's going to be some dividends paid. Did you see that? Did it manifest as early as the scrimmage here that maybe this is going to be a shot happy club?
Yeah, like the shots were, I think, 16-9 for Team Blue and over Team White. Actually, no, it was Team White that had all the shots, but didn't score against Silovs. In terms of run of play and sort of implementing Rick Tocchet's systems, I'm not sure that you're able to pick up anything from 40 minutes of scrimmage action. There's no question when Daniel Sprong has the puck on his stick, he wants to shoot. And there was a 2-on-1 in the game where Arshdeep Bains came down the right side and Sprong, as a right-handed shot, was over on the left. So I was thinking, all right, put it in his wheelhouse. Let's see this. This is what the people came to see. And I don't know if the defender recognized that as well, and maybe shaded a little towards Sprong. Arshdeep held onto the puck and got a decent shot away, but it wasn't what I wanted to see on that rush. I wanted to see Sprong unload, because when they were working on the power play, and again, there were no defenders. They just had their 5 guys out in sort of their positions before the scrimmage, and Sprong was in a bumper spot on the power play group that he was with, and a puck came to him in the interior, and just all in one motion, like an absolute laser of a one-timer up over the shoulder of the goaltender, made it look easy. And I noticed that a few times from him throughout training camp. So I'm curious to see how they use him. He's been lower in the lineup. Again, maybe that's the carrot to get him to work a little harder, to get opportunities. How many games is Jonathan Lekaremaki going to get through the preseason? Is he going to last through all the exhibition games? Or, at some point, will they experiment with some others and maybe give a player like Sprong or Höglander an opportunity there? So lots of questions still remain. I mean, they got down to manageable numbers after Sunday's scrimmage, and essentially we'll have 2 groups here moving forward. And so I would assume with these back-to-back games to start the preseason in Vancouver and Abbotsford on Tuesday and Wednesday, one of the teams that we saw in Penticton will play one of the games, one of the teams will play the other, and then from there, maybe further roster reductions and some mixing and matching as they head for a 3-game and 4-night weekend starting on Friday.
What's the procedure for new guy Kevin Lankinen, and what did you make of the signing on Saturday?
Yeah, he is supposed to arrive here in town today. He's been skating with pros in Finland, but they've been getting their season started, and some of the other Finnish National Hockey Leaguers obviously would have peeled off and come over to North America. So, in terms of game readiness, I'm not sure where he's going to be. He's been doing this dance with the Canucks for a while now, and really it was a game of chicken. And ultimately, it sounds like he ran out of NHL options and blinked first and takes the 1-year contract. But look, it's an NHL contract, and he's going to get some game action with the Vancouver Canucks. So much of this predicated on Thatcher Demko's health and readiness, and we just don't know. So that remains a wild card in the short term. They had to make a move here, Matt. Like, as camp went along, it became apparent. Dylan Ferguson on a PTO, a guy with 3 games of NHL experience and played last year in the K, he had a tough camp. And he got demoted to the point that they promoted Ty Young, a 20-year-old, still with junior eligibility. He was the 4th goaltender at the scrimmage. And in fact, on Saturday as well, skated with one of the main groups. So Dylan Ferguson released from his PTO, no longer in camp. Things didn't go particularly well for him. They didn't go all that well for Jiri Patera either. And so this is where the move had to be made, not only at the NHL level, but you've got to think about Abbotsford as well. And ultimately, if Thatcher Demko gets the clean bill of health and he comes back and it's a Demko-Lankinen situation, Silov's waiver exempt, he can go down to Abbotsford, but he can't play every game down there. And so, Jiri Patera, again, it's training camp. I'm not going to lose my mind over what I saw, but you're goalie at this level. You got to stop some pucks. And it was a bit of a struggle for him, I thought, in a lot of the drills. So before the Lankinen move, you had Silovs, you had Tolopilo, and then you had a bunch of guys here in camp, late in camp, that were struggling. So I wasn't the least bit surprised. We've talked about this for the last couple of weeks. I felt that there would be another goaltender brought in. It originally was Dylan Ferguson. That one didn't work out so well. But Kevin Lankinen, a proven NHLer, a guy that's got the job done, decent numbers. I think he understands his role when you're playing behind UC Saros. You're not going to play very much in Nashville. So tried to make the most of his opportunities. I think it was 17 appearances last year and 11 victories on a decent national team, obviously, that put up a fight against the Canucks in the postseason. So, yeah, he's supposed to arrive in town after a long flight from Finland. We'll see about adjustments on the body clock and all of those types of things. Can't imagine that he'd be ready to go in either of these games on Tuesday or Wednesday. But the beauty of having as many bodies as they do in camp is there's a game group and a non-game group. The non-game group will practice and skate, and I would think that Lankinen would have NHL shooters to face whenever he gets through his medicals and gets clearance. So I would think he'd probably be on the ice as early as Tuesday. Full team day off for the Canucks, as you can imagine, after training camp here on Monday. And then it's game day, the first of 6 in the preseason. So we'll get a better sense on Tuesday when we get a chance to talk to Rick Tocchet. Maybe we'll hear from Kevin Lankinen. We haven't yet. But it was funny on Saturday, as the sessions were winding down, Patrick Elvine was pacing in sort of the lower lobby of the South Okanagan Event Center, phone up to his ear. And he looked like a man on a mission, like he was making some calls to make some things happen. And then, a couple hours later, they put out the news that Lankinen is part of the Vancouver Canucks group here moving forward. So, it was insurance they needed, and they waited him out and got him at the price that they wanted. So I think it was pretty good business by the Vancouver Canucks.
Agreed. Do you think he's going to be important to their fortunes this season?
I do. I think as it stands right now, Thatcher Demko is not going to be ready for the start of the season. So it's a question then of how long do they have to move forward without the race? And when you look at the schedule, they don't play any back-to-backs until mid-November. So there's going to be lots of practice time. I think there's going to be plenty of evaluation time. They're not going to have to lean on one guy. I do think that based on what he did for the organization in the playoffs and the camp that he had in Sunday scrimmage, I think the Canucks owe it to Artur Silovs to give him opening night. Beyond that, though, I think just about everything is up in the air. So I do think Kevin Lankinen is going to get some starts. And again, a guy that's primarily been a backup, is this going to be a 1A, 1B in the first month of the season? Is he going to get more starts than maybe he would have thought he was going to get? But I think that was part of look, he and his agent, I'm sure, understood the Demko situation and saw this as an opportunity. And it's part of why they remained interested in talking to the Vancouver Canucks. So, yeah, yes, he's going to be important. If he gets NHL starts, he's got to deliver. And I think he's going to have an opportunity here to do that for the Canucks in the early going this season.
Be honest, how much have you researched Popliteus since Kevin Woodley let that one slip earlier this morning?
Yeah, I'll cop to it. I have done a little
I've never heard of it, though, too, before. Like, I've done a lot of physio. I've got kids that are big into athletics. I've never heard of this muscle myself.
So it made me laugh because, and I know you and I had a little text thread going last week about, like, what exactly was the injury? And I was thinking to myself, like, imagine if Thatcher had stood there with a straight face and basically given us the WebMD definition of what he was going. It would have been incredible. But like, as I read it this morning, I was like, yeah, it's there. It's in the knee. I've never heard of it, whatever. But clearly it's causing him problems. But no, I think, it's funny with all the back end data that's available on websites. Like, I can imagine people are wondering, like, these website engineers, like, why is this being researched in this pocket of Western Canada this morning? Yeah. Exactly.
Well, I mean, we all have become pretty good physiotherapists, web physiotherapists, because when we cover sports, I think we know all the L's, the MCLs and UCLs, all that sort of stuff. We know adductors, and we've heard these terms throughout the multi-decades of our career. None of us have heard this. So this backs up what he was saying, that it's a kind of a novel thing for his caregivers too. And I've seen other reactions from physiotherapists online going, I've never treated anybody with something wrong with their popliteus.
Well, you learn something new every day, right? And
yeah.
I guess for all of us and many more, this is our item of the day.
But that's the concern, though, is now I think, now that we do know the exact, I think now we can share in the, that's why we don't have timelines, because it's not something anybody's come across.
Next, we're going to find out that there's one specialist in the world in Eastern Europe, and that's where he's going to have to get on a plane to go and work on his. Hopefully, that's not the case. But you're right. I don't know that there is a specialist out there in this one particular muscle. But yeah, it does sort of back up this notion where he talked about, like, there were no case studies, certainly no hockey players, and only a handful of soccer players, and so just not much known about this muscle and how it reacts and how it ultimately rehabs and heals up. But for his case, let's hope that things are smooth. And again, he looked decent on the ice and was out there. And the fact that he was able to get out there on a daily basis, right? Like there was so much sort of uncertainty going into camp. There were reports that he had been on the ice, but nobody had seen him. To see him day after day after day and look like there was some progression and ramping things up. There was nothing in the workout on Thursday that prevented him from going on the ice Friday. I think at this stage, all of those types of things have to be considered positive, that he was able to put in the work at training camp in Penticton.
And Dakota Joshua coming back soon. Talk it aloud over the weekend, Jeff.
Yeah, that one was curious. Apparently, Dakota was there in camp around the guys. He broke the news to them as a group on the day that the team put out his statement. I never saw him with my own eyes, but I'm not going to doubt that he was there, and probably good for, just the mental well-being to be back around his teammates again as hockey season begins. And certainly they all have his back, and nothing but the highest regard for Dakota Joshua. But sometimes when Rick Tocchet gets going, he says things that you kind of miss in real time in the scrum, because he's talking about so many things. And then walked away from, was it Fridays, I think, where he said, Dakota's not going to be out long. And then he said, I want to be clear, no timeline here, but he's going to be back soon. So let's take that as good news for Dakota Joshua, but certainly no sign of him on the ice or skating at this early stage of his recovery. So soon, doing a bit of heavy lifting in that statement, just because I think it's open to interpretation. But yeah, I mean, look, he's an important part of the team. We know that. We saw that. They committed to him in the offseason with the contract. I'm sure he was raring to go. There's some belief that the diagnosis was made late in the summer. So I think he had a summer to train, and then obviously came as a shock to him in the hockey club. So I don't know what the return to play protocol is here in terms of trying to ramp things up. But first and foremost is his health. Obviously, beyond that is his ability to rejoin the Vancouver Canucks. But yeah, I mean, I'll take talk at face value that, this isn't something that's going to prevent him from playing until the new year or something like that. Like, it sounded to me like they do expect to have him back and in the fold here before too long.
Lastly, Ratu Lekkerimäki, 3 to 4 games each in the preseason. That is a holistic, comprehensive opportunity for both young players.
Yeah, and Baines was the other one that he name-checked in that group. And, of course, Sarjdeep has made his appearance with the Vancouver Canucks, and Ratu has to a lesser degree, but not last year. Lekkerimäki doesn't look out of place. The shot is big league ready. That much we know. There were moments, and we thought about this, one thing to stand out at young stars, and I really felt this about Vilmer Ulriksson, who made the first round of cuts, and that's impressive too. At 19 with junior eligibility, I think he's going to get some game action. Sawyer Minio, the other one with junior eligibility that stuck around, and the coach name-checked him for a guy that had stood out to him at times during the drills. But for those three that you mentioned, Ratu getting to skate with Höglander and Garland, like, he can't ask for a whole lot more than that for a training camp. And Höglander and Garland, you know what you've got. You know what you expect. Höglander, I thought, had a terrific camp. Coach singled him out for the fitness testing. But Ratu was able to keep up. Like, I didn't notice him languishing behind those two other guys that are able to scoot around the ice. There's still going to be some elements of his game that he's got to refine here. But I do think that Aatu Ratu has put himself in a position now in the organization where he's one of those guys that is on the short list of first call-ups if he doesn't make this team out of camp. Lekkerimäki's going to get a good look. I would imagine Wednesday is they've already put out the fact that Paterson and DeBrusk are playing in Abbotsford. So I would think that Lekkerimäki's going to be on that line and start the preseason there. So a great opportunity for him and a great chance for the fans out in Abbey to get a look at Jonathan Lekkerimäki, who's probably going to play down there. But yeah, I mean, for me, it was more about some of the things off the puck and playing in traffic and smaller ice and all those types of things. But I do think that Lekkerimäki built off of strong young stars and was able to carry that over. And if you walked in cold from the outside and just saw a bunch of NHLers skating, like, I don't think you could have discerned that Lekkerimäki wasn't one of them, that he looked like he belonged. And again, in the scrimmage, you would have loved to have seen him a goal or two. Didn't happen, but that doesn't mean that he played poorly. And so, yeah, I mean, these are the guys that the organization have sort of identified at the top of that list of guys that really are bumping up against jobs. And I would think the flip side of that then is Nils Åman, Phil DiGiuseppe, they're coming for your job. So
sure.
what's, Sammy Blais, if he gets in, and Sammy Blais was in a bit of a tough spot, and he talked about it on Saturday. He's a physical player, a big body that's supposed to finish checks and separate guys. You're not going to do that in drills on a PTO. Was there a chance in the scrimmage to be a little more physical? Rick talked afterwards. He would like to have seen a little bit more. But I think now is where a player like Sammy Blais has to, if it's going to happen for him, it has to happen in the preseason. And even a Kiefer Sherwood, I think it's going to be fun to watch him ramp things up now that they're playing against guys on another team rather than trying to staple your own teammates through the boards in Penticton.
Both of those guys like to play on the edge, and it's hard to put yourself into that position in a scrimmage. We should give some credit to Jeff. I mean, this team does not have a deep cupboard. And you mentioned Ulrichsen, Sorminio making that cut as well. Not because he's close, but just the fact that they don't feel like he's going to drag them down going forward, that he's like completely out of place. A nice touch for Minio to get this look because, he's got an outside chance of World Juniors. I mean, he is a prospect. He's not on the tip of a casual Canuck fan's tongue right now, but, again, all you do is you ask for guys to progress, and it sounds like he's progressing.
Yeah, and I think if you go back through like the last 5 years of the draft cycle and you think of some of the players that they took in those middle rounds, and they were longer shots, even as third-round picks. But like Sorminio right now is tracking. He's still a long way from playing in the National Hockey League, but he looks like a guy that is tracking in the right direction. And Rick talks about landmarks. Vilmer Ulrichsen was drafted as a curiosity, 6'6". You can't teach it, obviously, but he came over to the Ontario Hockey League, got his feet wet, showed that he wasn't afraid, mixed it up, those types of things. And, now going back as a 19-year-old, but has made it through the first round of cuts at an NHL camp. Good on him. And I think it's a reward for the fine young stars that he had. And then you can go even a little bit deeper. The other Elias Paterson, I guess, as we found out, that is the distinguisher that the defenseman is Elias. They're still high on him, obviously, and this is going to be his first year in North America. I think there were some moments in the scrimmage where he looked a little panicky with the puck, but again, this guy's 20 years old. Like, I don't know if people, I certainly hope they didn't think that he was going to push for an NHL job this year, but there was enough in this camp to believe that he's checking a lot of the boxes that they've put in front of him to this point, and now a full season in Abbotsford is going to be terrific for his development. So, a few years back, some of those mid-round picks, whether it was a Yanni Yermo or go back to Tony Utonen and Jacob Prescott, like those guys all just always felt like long shots, even though a lot of the guys that I just mentioned were drafted in the same neighborhood. They feel like better prospects now. Maybe it's recency bias. Maybe we said the same sorts of things about some of those other guys a few years back, but it does feel like, while Lekaramäki is the head of the class, without a doubt, some of the, as you said, the cupboard's a little fuller now with some of those later mid-round picks than it's been the case in recent years.
Yeah. Marvelous stuff, Jeff. Thank you for this. We'll continue to track the Canucks through this week and catch up with you on Friday.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, guys.